Previously on Kentucky Case Files, Amanda Ross was shot to death outside her Lexington home. The man police were looking for, her ex-fiancé, Steve Nunn, a former state legislator and scion of one of Kentucky's most powerful former governors. I'm Emily Steele.
And I'm Marcus Roland, and this is Kentucky Case Files, the Steve Nunn Case, Part 2, Pursuit and Justice. By noon on September 11th, the day Ross was found dead, police knew where to find Nunn. Kentucky Case Files talked to Nunn's ex-wife, Tracy Dameron Pergram, author of the memoir Trail of Feathers.
I got a phone call from an attorney in Lexington, and he told me what had happened. And I could not grasp it. The police couldn't find him anywhere. And one detective called me and said, "Do you have any idea where he would be?" There's just my intuition, something. I said, "He's at his daddy and mother's cemetery. I just know it. I feel it." And they headed out that way. And while the police were at my home, and I was on the phone with the children then, telling them what was happening step by step, I had them on speaker and I was repeating what the police were saying to my police there. "We're at the cemetery. There's a car there. Steve is at the grave. He's got a gun. He shot himself." I mean, it was like blow by blow. And it was so traumatic. And you could hear the gun. It went pop. And then they said there's blood everywhere because I guess he had slit his wrist. But right there as it happened, hearing it, and the children hearing, and it was just something you could never forget. He told me verbatim, now this is Steve talking, he said, "Tracy, I don't know why I'm not dead." He said, "I wanted to die." He said, "I didn't want to go to prison. I wanted to die." And he said he put the gun to his stomach, and when he saw and he shot it, and he said how it missed his stomach, he said he'll never know. And I still don't understand, but something happened to this man who was a good man. I mean, it wasn't perfect by any means, and he was a wild man, but he was good in his soul, and he wanted to help people and do good. No one that knew the Steve Nunn that I know could ever believe this in a gazillion years. Steve Nunn that I know, if I were to tell him this is what's going to happen, he wouldn't believe it because it was so not in his character. And I remember on 2020, they interviewed Larry Forgy, and I was on there and other people. And Larry Forgy said, Steve was a gentle man. He was a gentle soul. And he really was. But he was a wild, gentle, wild man, meaning he liked to drink. He liked to have a good time, dance. He enjoyed life to the fullest and wanted me to enjoy it. He would always say, just relish in this moment, love life. We would travel and eat the best of foods and experience the best of this. That's a lot to handle for a woman who lived this with him and just saw the best in him.
Nunn was arrested and charged with wanton endangerment, and then eventually with murder and violation of a protective order. Kentucky State Police took the ex-governor's son into custody. He had gone from the governor's house to the Statehouse to the jailhouse.
Police went to work gathering evidence, gunshot residue on Nunn's hands and in his car, cell tower data near Ross's home, handwritten notes suggesting premeditation, a file labeled Psycho Bitch found in Nunn's car, a .38 caliber pistol with 5 spent shell casings. The caliber bullet from that gun matched those in Ross's body, which were too damaged to make an actual match on ballistics. Police also discovered that Nunn had ordered a gravestone for himself with his date of death engraved as September 11th, 2009. Under questioning, Nunn told police that Ross had ruined his life and that he was at the end of his rope. He mentioned wanting revenge, although he never provided police with an actual confession. The case was purely circumstantial, but it was strong circumstantial evidence.
In November 2009, a Fayette County grand jury indicted Nunn for murder and violation of a domestic violence order. That constituted aggravating circumstances and, thanks to the very law Nunn co-sponsored in 1998 when he was a legislator, it would allow the prosecution to seek the death penalty. Trial motions would fly back and forth over requests for psychological evaluations, admissibility of certain evidence, and fights over whether the death penalty could be sought. The case drew national attention from such news outlets as CNN, 2020, 48 Hours, and the New York Times. Even Glamour magazine covered the case.
Meanwhile, Nunn was sitting in jail. His time at the Fayette County Detention Center in Lexington was not uneventful. In May 2011, while playing basketball, an inmate physically assaulted him. Then on June 6, 2011, Nunn was threatened and held hostage by an inmate who allegedly blocked Nunn's cell door, bound him, and wielded a makeshift weapon. An emergency response team eventually freed Nunn and subdued his captor.
The legal case surrounding Nunn was also getting more intense. With ever-increasing public attention, the threat of the death penalty hanging over him, again thanks to the law he offered, and possibly other factors, Nunn did something that surprised some observers. He took a plea deal. On June 28, 2011, Nunn, for the first time, confessed in court that he killed Amanda Ross, pleading guilty to murder to avoid a capital murder trial.
Here's WLKY reporting the news.
Steve Nunn pleaded guilty today to the murder of his fiancée.
With prosecutors seeking the death penalty, Nunn and his attorney reached a deal with the prosecutors, and they decided to go ahead with this situation. In exchange for the guilty plea today, the 58-year-old Nunn has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
After his sentencing, Nunn was transferred to the state prison system. Today, he is housed at the Kentucky State Reformatory in LaGrange, Kentucky. There, he isn't Steve Nunn, son of former Governor Louis Nunn. He is inmate 313971. Currently 72 years old, he's serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Now, prison did not prove to be the end of Nunn's dealings with the courts, because in 2014, he made headlines yet again when he filed a motion claiming his lawyer gave him bad advice. He said he pleaded guilty only to avoid a civil lawsuit by Ross's mother. He sought to have the guilty pleas withdrawn and a new trial be set because of that information.
Mark, who was his defense attorney?
Warren Scoville was his lawyer.
Was he prominent? Like, I would think someone of Nunn's background would go for a heavy hitter, a local Robert Kardashian, if you will.
Yeah, Scoville was a well-known lawyer in London, Kentucky, and he was very experienced in criminal defense law. He was also friends with Nunn and Tracy told me she approached him about representing Nunn.
But I want to back up because, yes, it was circumstantial evidence, but I guess it doesn't surprise me he would take a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, given the strength of the circumstantial evidence. But some folks really thought he would claim innocence and hope that he could make a case to keep that reasonable doubt in jurors' mind.
And there may have also been some negotiations with the prosecution about their not pursuing or maybe working around that law in some way. And I don't know what those grounds would have been, what they would have alleged, but because the law is very clear with regard to making a capital offense out of a death that occurs as a result of the violation of a domestic violence order.
It is interesting that for someone who, at the time that the murder was committed, gave all appearances of being in the midst of suicidal ideation, would then decide they didn't want to face the death penalty.
Warren Scoville told a Louisville news station that had the case gone to trial, he would have alleged extreme emotional disturbance, which might have been an angle for avoiding the death penalty or even life without parole.
Interesting, though, that we fast forward and he claims that his lawyers gave him bad advice and that except for that advice, he would not have struck the plea deal. And so why did he think that he should get his guilty plea withdrawn and be able to have a new trial?
It's interesting because not too long after the murder, Diana Ross, Amanda's mother, filed several civil lawsuits, and there was one in particular against Nunn seeking damages of over $20 million. What Nunn was alleging was that Scoville had told him that Ross's attorney had agreed to drop, that they had agreed to drop the civil suit that she had filed against Nunn if he were to agree to plead guilty and accept the penalty of life imprisonment without parole. The attorney for Diana Ross denied that there was ever such an agreement. And he tried to revive all this again 4 years after that when he returned to court. This time he'd filed an actual lawsuit. He was alleging breach of contract and fraud. His argument would have been that it was a contract between his attorney, or him through his attorney, and Ms. Ross through her attorney, that he would take the plea and they would dismiss the civil lawsuit. So it was a, I'll do this if you do that type of contractual agreement.
But all of his attempts to obtain a new trial failed.
One thing you can say about Steve Nunn is he'll try it all. I mean, if you
Yeah.
think back to the domestic violence hearing where it was, no, I was defending myself. Look, I'm not a threat to her. Actually, I never lived there. And then once the plea deal is struck, it's first that no, my lawyer gave me bad advice. And then no, the family breached a contract. He'll really try. He would really try any angle.
Here again is Tracy Dameron Pergram.
When did you last speak to him?
Probably a year, maybe a year and a half ago. I still receive letters from him. I received a letter from him about 6 months ago. And he always tells me he loves me, talks about all the fun times we have. He has given me the rights to his life story. He has sent me his whole life story. And I've read it, and I was shocked about some things I wasn't shocked about. But he did say, you know, Tracy was the love of my life. And he goes back and talks about his dad, his mother, his life. But he's always asking for something like, will you go talk to the governor? Will you call this person? Will you call this to help me get out of here? And that's not my responsibility. You pay the consequences for your actions.
Coming in part 3 of the Steve Nunn case, Amanda Ross's mother turns grief into action. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, call 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-SAFE. You're not alone.
Sourcing for this podcast came from our independent reporting, as well as the Lexington Herald-Leader, the Louisville Courier-Journal, Bowling Green Daily News, the New York Times, Kentucky Educational Television, Wave 3 News,
WLKY, WKYT,
NBC News, ABC News, CBS News, the news programs 2020 and 48 Hours, Louisville Public Media, and BehindTheBlueWall.blogspot.com. Special thanks to the hosts of Murder Police Podcast for their assistance.